Let's roll.
Hey, Mary Lee, nice to meet you today.
Nice to meet you.
So I've been looking over some of the information we talked about last time, and I've come up with a few options, but I wanted to go first, and I wanted to just sort of talk over what we talked about last time, review some of the things, and what I want you to do is I've identified a few things I think are sort of the main things that, to me, as a lawyer, seem like the most important things that we should be thinking about, and so I wanted to make sure that we're clear on those before I actually give you your options. And so there's three things that I think that we need, that we're not really sure about. There's three sort of variables that worry me as your counsel. And the first one is, we don't really know whether Sam is actually your son. And that makes me a little, that makes me a little nervous as your lawyer sort of advising you, because we have to figure out, like, you don't necessarily have liability right now. You don't necessarily have any sort of responsibility if you're not really sure that he's your son. And so, looking at the story, I was a little surprised, because generally people who work in adoption services don't give out that information very easily. And so the idea that Sam could go there and just say, who are my original parents, and find out like that seems a little fishy. And so that's, but I mean, at the same time though, it's possible that did happen. Rules do get broken all the time. People don't know about it. But that's something that we can't be entirely sure of. And so there is a possibility that we could go and we could do DNA testing, or we could do something like that. But without that, we can't be certain whether or not Sam's story is actually true, or if there's something else going on. On a similar note, one of the things that's really difficult that we sort of have as grips that we have to hedge is we don't know exactly what Sam's motivations are, right? Because he contacted you, he said right after his adoptive parents told him that they were not his real biological parents, but he hasn't really asked for anything, right? Like, he didn't say, you know, I want you to, you know, be a father, or I want you to support me financially, or whatever. I guess there's sort of the option that, you know, he might go public, which would be the worst risk to you, but he's given no reason that he would do that. And he, again, could ask for money, but didn't. And that makes it seem like there is a possibility that all he wanted was that meeting, and there may not be any sort of follow-up. But we really don't know. And the third thing I think that's important is to keep in mind that the potential repercussions if this does go public are really big. Obviously, if your aunt finds out, you know, she's kind of an old conservative woman, thinks people dress too sexy in the city, so she's probably not going to be too happy to find out about this. And then likewise, your reputation is built on the fact that you're honest and trustworthy and you have strong values. And so if people find that you have this like illegitimate child that you like never acknowledged or knew about, it would look really bad. There is the opportunity, there's a potential, I think, that if you found out that that was going to go public, there is the potential for you to say, to stand up and say, you know, I didn't know about this until like a few months ago, and then as a person of honesty, as a person of values, I wanted to be honest with the public about it. There is that, but if you don't have to do that, you may not want to. Again, that's kind of up to you, and that depends on what your priorities are. And so I do have a few options I wanted to give you, and I wanted to talk through each one. And we can either talk about those, or we can pick from them, or if you decide that there's something else you want to do, or if you want to think about it, that's also fine as well. I'm just kind of giving you my advice as your lawyer on the sort of the most logical or most reasonable options that I was able to think of since we last spoke. And so when you came to me, one of your first ideas was, well, maybe I could actually just contact him and then offer to pay for his college. And you were wondering whether that would be a good idea. And so you could do that if you wanted. You even have the option of explaining sort of the situation you're in, depending on how much you want to, I guess, share with him. Then again, this is someone that you didn't even know existed until a few weeks ago, and so that may not be what you want to do. If you do that, there's obviously, I think that's something that's good for you. It's you know, it's a chance to sort of do the right thing. He's probably less likely to go public, or less likely to try to, I don't know, harm your public career or anything like that. And you will sort of have that satisfaction. There are a few risks, though. You have to get worried that if you proactively offer, for example, if you proactively say, I want to pay for your college, and maybe you say, like, in exchange, do this, and you phrase it like that, he might consider that a bribe, and he might consider that you're sort of ashamed of him, and that might actually upset him even more. So you probably don't want to do that. But from what you've told me, and from what I've been able to find out, I mean, Sam does seem like just sort of a normal good 19-year-old who hasn't done anything or hasn't shown any indication that his character would be that way. So that's probably not that likely. Depending on, of course, where he goes to school, he's taking a year off after his graduation. Depending on where he was going to college, that might cost a lot of money. You do have, what I think, $3 million NT coming in from your trust fund every year. You do have your salaries in there, so that wouldn't break you. But it's something to keep in mind as well as, if he wants to go to like Harvard or something, and he got into Harvard, that might be more expensive than if he was going to a local university. You also run the risk of creating a paper trail. A lot of times in situations like this, when people are worried about maybe sort of hiding a family member or a son or a mistress or whatever, what ends up happening is when you're transferring money, there becomes documentation. And so you do run the risk that if somebody was digging really deeply, they might find that there was a record of financial transactions going to a family in California. That's something you want to think about as well. As again, it's a small risk, and people would have to be investigating you, but it is something that could potentially happen, and you want to keep that in mind. And then likewise, you didn't seem like you were particularly interested in having an emotional relationship with Sam, which is understandable because, since he was born until he was 19, he did have a set of parents that he thought were his parents, and he's formed an attachment with them. But if you do go through with this, you would obviously be increasing contact, and you might cause him to want an emotional relationship that he currently doesn't. And so if that's a priority for you to not have that, that's something you would want to weigh in that decision as well. So that's one of the things you could do, and we'll come back to that. The other option, of course, is that you could just not do anything, because he hasn't really given any indication that he wants anything more from you other than that one meeting. And so in that case, you wouldn't have to worry about spending money. And again, Sam sort of seemed like he wanted to talk to you to know where he came from biologically, but he didn't say anything when you met, from what you told me, that would indicate he was looking for emotional support or financial support or anything like that. And sometimes I think when people are becoming adults and they're coming out of childhood, they want to have a better idea of their roots and where they come from, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they want to completely change the way that their social relationships and life are structured and throw themselves into that. And so it's possible that after that meeting, Sam might be going and moving on with his life, and you wouldn't have to worry about anything else, and this problem would just sort of go away. The only drawbacks are that obviously it's going to be kind of risky. Things can change, and you would have to worry about whether or not you were prepared for this. Maybe he takes this year off and he decides at the end of it that he does want you to be more of a part of his life. That would be a change that you might not be prepared for if you just sort of assume that this disappeared and this went away. And you want to make sure that you are prepared for if something changes, that you've sort of thought of that before. And likewise, say, I don't know, during the next year, Sam goes through like a really tough learning experience. He gets like really angry, like teenagers sometimes do, and decides he wants to ruin your career. That would be something you wouldn't be prepared for as well. And so there is a risk of that. Not having contact with him, you don't necessarily know if his mind is changing or what's going on with him. And so obviously as a result of that, there's the potential that somebody else would find out. And that's something you want to keep in mind, whether that would be something that you would consider. There's also the option, I suppose, you could try to preempt this if at any point you do feel like it would come out either because of Sam or because of someone else. You could try to preempt it and you could go public. In that case, obviously, you want to keep in mind that that's kind of the least desirable situation for you, I would imagine, because this is politics is your life. And the last election is by you won it by a really close margin, and that may not happen again if something like this comes out. There are politicians who in the past have been able to spin that. There are people who have been able to say, well, as a man of integrity, I have to share this with the public, or I have to be honest about this, I can't hide this. And sometimes people will respect that decision, but you would probably know your voters better than I would. And that's something that you could potentially turn into a positive, but it would be very difficult. And you want to keep that in mind as well, as there I guess are the opportunities to sort of preempt that problem. But it's still much more risky, I think, than other decisions. And if that isn't appealing to you, we could always go, I guess, and you could try to get more information. You could consider doing a DNA test, or paternity test. There are a few risks with that as well. Generally, when prominent figures go and do DNA tests, they find out that the people working at that company are more likely to leak that information. So privacy is sometimes a difficulty. And also I think the act of requesting a DNA test would make Sam, or would really make anyone, very hostile, because it's sort of a questioning and it's sort of an aggressive attack. So it is another option, and if you are a lot more skeptical than I am, that is an option for you to consider as well. It really kind of depends on if you're not sure if the other options sound good and maybe you kind of want to get more information, there's the option for that. There's the option to just talk with Sam and get to know more about like his family. Maybe you could do a little more investigation of your own. And maybe you find out that he confused you with someone else. Maybe his biological parents actually were someone else. But it really depends on kind of whether that would be an option that you would be interested in or you would want to pursue. So what are your thoughts from that, and just keeping in mind sort of the things that we don't know?
First of all, I think that having a DNA test will be because it offers some certainty and some closure. So I will know for sure whether Sam is actually my son, whether he's not my son at all. But suppose you may be right in that there are certain risks associated with a DNA test. For example, Sam might actually turn hostile because he will think that I'm actually doubting his integrity or questioning him. And there's a risk of the information leading to the press itself, which is something I want to avoid at all costs. So I'm not actually sure, should I just have a test? Should I just do the DNA test? Or should I try out other means of finding information for him? Maybe hiring a private investigator to dig out more information? Or should I try to do a test secretly?
Well, you probably can't do a test secretly because you have to have some sort of like genetic material from him to test, right? And that's kind of the difficulty, is that if you do ask for a DNA test, you're going to have him cooperate, and he's going to know. And if it's possible. We have no way of knowing whether or not his story is true. It's possible that it is. It's possible that it's not. And so let's assume the worst case, that he is your son and he really likes you, or he thought that meeting you was very pleasant or whatever. But then you turn around and your next contact is, I don't think you're my son, I want to have a DNA test. That would be very offensive to him, because if he's 19, he's still kind of a teenager, and having someone that he hasn't known about for 19 years just turn around and be like, I don't know who you are, I'm kind of doubting your story, it may not be the best way to go. So if based on your meeting with him, you don't think that would happen, again, that's an avenue we can pursue. I don't think that we could do that secretly. We would probably have to have cooperation, and I think there might be legal ramifications if you did that secretly. But again, that's an option. That's not the only option. I mean, if you, it may actually just be easier, or it might be cheaper or less risky to go on and do another option. It really depends on kind of what your priorities are.
My priorities should be to basically keep this secret because election is coming, and as you already mentioned, I just won the previous election by a very small margin, and any scandal or any adverse information concerning me will have severe chances of damaging my election chances. Furthermore, Aunt Sabrina is rather conservative, and she might actually cut me off if she finds out what happened. So I think my priorities are keeping it quiet.
Right. Well, so in that case, you could, as I said, you could offer to help pay with his education, because that was sort of your initial impulse. Or you could wait and see, like, over the next year, maybe he decides he doesn't want to go to college, and then that's not an issue. Or maybe he decides that he would rather focus on his adoptive family and not worry about you. It really depends, again. I mean, both of those options I think could work, because they involve either doing something that Sam would see as a positive gesture, or they would involve not antagonizing or sort of making yourself really obvious and known. Whereas, like as I mentioned, the DNA test might be considered a more aggressive action. So if you're looking for safer routes with lower risk, you might want to do one of those options instead, if that's what your priorities are.
In this case, given my situation, I think that I'll prefer to keep the situation as peaceful as possible, so I don't think I'll pursue the DNA action. And will you recommend, what are your thoughts about offering him tuition, sponsorship for tuition in case he really wants it? As in, he might not want it, but I can always offer it to him in case he decides that he really wants to go to a good college and needs financial support. At least I'll be able to offer it to him.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's actually, I mean, that's not a bad option at all. I think that the only difference, I think, between doing that and kind of waiting and seeing is that you're changing his thought process. So it's possible that maybe he actually decides at the end of this year he doesn't want to go to college, and then you offer to give him a free ride, and so then he becomes interested, and then that's going to increase your contact with him. On the other hand, it's a really nice gesture, and I imagine that, you know, if someone offered that to me, even if, like if my biological father who put me up for adoption offered that, it would be a really nice gesture, I think, and it would be sort of doing the right thing, or what would be seen as the right thing. I don't think that from what you've told me, it doesn't sound like Sam is the kind of person who would turn around and then be like, I'm going to tell all the news in the entire world that I am your secret son, right? So I think that if that's an option that you'd be interested in, that would be a good option to pursue. But again, you have to keep in mind that the risks are that A, it could cost a lot of money, and B, that could lead to him wanting an emotional relationship, just because you would be contacting each other more, and that would sort of make him feel like there was a connection between you and like he sort of owed you something. Would you be okay with that?
I think we fine with that. Furthermore, I've actually like 3 million plus my salary a year, which works out to say maybe about 6 million Taiwanese dollars a year. So I guess I'll be able to put some money every month or every year and put in a trust fund, and it'll be ready for him in case he actually decides that he wants to use it. And on top of that, another consideration that I'll be having is that this move is seen by me.
Right.
Besides helping Sam, it's also seen as a defensive move. In case should things get out of hand, should the news media actually get wind of this news, it will actually put me in a better light, and I'll be able to explain things better to my voters. And it might also help to explain and settle matters with Aunt Sabrina. Even if she knows that I had a fling in Jamaica with someone, she actually knows that I'm trying to do the right thing. So I suppose it might put me on better terms with her, and she will cut me off so easy. So I think the pros of this move outweigh the cons to me anyway.
Well, I mean, so that's good. I just before we make that, I think it's good to just make sure that this is the best option, I guess, in your eyes. The only thing I would keep in mind about that is one of the things that you're known for in public is that you're also very honest, and so not being public about this could be considered a form of dishonesty. On the other hand, obviously, it's most likely that voters would rather identify with you making that offer rather than focusing on the fact that you didn't make that intensely public. But that is something I would ask that you keep in mind, is just keeping in mind that that is a risk. But if you think that's the best option over the other options or over any other options and you're happy with that, then I think that's the option that we should pursue. So is that the option that you feel is best for you?
I think that would be the best given the limited choices that I have so far. But I'm not really sure if I should actually tell Aunt Sabrina up front.
That's a really good question. I'm not sure if you guys you talked over the phone, I think, right? And then you mentioned that you flew to California to San Francisco and you actually met in person. Have you been communicating since then at all?
No, not really. Ever since the meeting with Sam, we have not spoken, so I'm not really sure.
But do you have like a way to contact him?
Oh, I do have his contact details, so I'm able to get hold of him should the need arise.
I mean, I guess that's something that you would want to think about, because I don't think that one choice is necessarily better than the other. I think that doing it now in some ways, it's a good start, just because you've spoken recently, so he'll be sort of receptive to that. And that way, you know, and this is again, like, this is a young man, right? I mean, as he's making a decision over what he does after this year, that might be something that helps him make a better decision, that there's that offer out there. On the other hand, again, if you don't want to sort of impose on him, you could wait and see if he contacts you again. But it might be better if you do that now, just because that way you would be able to sort of, I guess he would probably feel a lot more gratitude towards you right now, rather than something else happening over the next year, and maybe he decides that he wants something else. So it probably, I think, in my opinion, I think that might be a better option, but it sort of depends on if you would be comfortable with that again.
I guess I'll think about it for now. I'll let you know where we meet next time.
Okay, sounds good. Let's meet and maybe just take a few days, take a week, and just think it over, and then we can decide from there. But we are we are sort of decided on going and doing this sort of trust fund or doing this sort of separate support. It's just a matter of timing them.
Yes.
Okay, well in that case I think that sounds like a good plan. Good luck making your decision, and we'll talk in a week.
Thank you.
Cool.